So it's got to be scary, Maddy, to contemplate going public with a story that could be embarrassing to the church while you're a BYU student.
It's terrifying. Absolutely.
What's that like? I mean, what was that like? So you contacted, in the most recent series of circumstances, you contacted the Trib this year, what, May?
Yeah, maybe April. I don't remember exactly.
And you say, I want to do a story?
Yeah, and I mean, we'd already started like a year previously, and then that reporter totally respected my decision to like put it on the back burner. And when I reached out again, she was right there, ready to pick up where we left off. I chose to use my name and my face because I like to be authentic. I don't like feeling like I have something to hide. And I mean, what happened to me was not my fault in any way, shape, or form. Like, why do I need to be ashamed or embarrassed or even scared of like repercussions? But it is very scary because, I mean, I'm complying with the honor code, and yet I have this fear that I will be viewed as antagonistic. But that's not my intention at all. Like, I sincerely want people to be able to serve missions in safety. Like, my own children one day, perhaps. Like, I want them to be able to go and be happy and heard and healthy and safe. And I just don't see how that is antagonistic. In fact, I feel like I'm trying to add to and make better what we have. But I am totally afraid that someone will portray me as a villain and kick me out of BYU. I mean, I've got backup plans, but I really want to stay at BYU. I want to finish there.
So what was anything you want to say about the process of working with the Tribune? Or does that need any explanation?
I think...
Because that's like a 4 or 5 month story, because it's not released until late August.
Right. So I think that Maddy and I can both say that Rachel went above and beyond in every way she possibly could as a woman, as a reporter, as an advocate, to make sure that the story was written in a way where we would be heard and our stories would be told appropriately. And we were shocked by the amount of time it took to do that, and at times exhausted and emotional and frustrated because we had a dozen different release dates for this article. And so the night before, 2 nights before, we'd be like, wow, what do you think? And then we'd get a text or a call saying that they were going to move it. And in these calls, when I would talk to Rachel, it was so apparent how much she knew about my I'll speak just on my own behalf, but she's recalling all of the names of the cities I lived in like this. Clearly it was her life, and she took great care in doing it. We got on the phone right after we read it, and I think initially we went to the Tribune for a reason. Utah news or media outlets can be a little bit biased, and we went to the Tribune for a reason. And I think we were prepared for the worst. And we were surprised by how fair it was, and also, horrified by some of the comments that were included. And I'll name one specific one about determining if you'd send missionaries to an area based on the question, would I send my granddaughter there? Which...
That's how the general authorities sort of create policy.
That's how it was communicated in the article, and it's probably not untrue, and it's so shocking. One, because I prefer fact-based decisions, and also I don't have to be your granddaughter for you to care about me. I'm just a human being, and you should care about where you're putting me, a volunteer. So I think neither of us regret
When it came out, how did you feel when the story hit the newsstands?
My initial reaction, I just cried because I felt like it was way too nice.
Way too nice to the church.
I felt it was extremely generous to them. Like, I appreciate the advancements that they've made, but man, it really made them look like they were on top of it and proactive, whereas our experience was...
Like the church was.
Yeah. And
the thing is, the Trib is owned by a faithful Mormon.
Well, but then
and Peggy Fletcher Stack is a faithful Mormon. Like,
yeah.
The Trib and long live the Trib. Utah needs an independent newspaper because the Deseret News with Tad Walsh is just egregiously propagandish and apologetic and biased. So on the one hand, long live the Tribune. On the other hand, the owner and many of the reporters there are faithful Mormons who have made temple commitments not to ever criticize the Lord's anointed, right? And to be faithful and to further the cause of Zion. So,
and I think it took a couple of hours for us and conversation to realize that what Rachel did was, at the beginning of this podcast, I talked about how I have two buckets, and one is my own healing and storytelling, and the other is I want missionaries to be safer. And for that cause, I think we feel that she wrote the article perfectly, because if my very conservative family members can share it on Facebook, then to me that says that she wrote it in a way that, everybody can get behind it and recognize that changes need to be made.
So by making it more constructive and friendly to the church, it makes more people willing to read it and listen to it. And
it wasn't necessarily friendly, because I think if you are a critical thinker as you read, you would have clearly pointed out, she talked about the do not travel list and how the State Department says to prepare your will before you go. So if you, and that's true. So if you read it critically, then sure, she didn't, rip anybody apart, which I'm glad she didn't, but you would also see that the processes and protocols still inadequate.
I think it just took me a couple of hours to get over my initial emotional response to it. I do think that my very favorite part is a juxtaposition of one church leader saying, teach your missionaries that they will be protected more so than their peers if they're obedient. That a mission is the safest place on the earth for them at this time. And then a couple paragraphs later, it quoted another leader saying, I don't know where they would get that youthful idea of protection. And I think that was my favorite part, because she didn't criticize anyone. She just laid out what they said, and said a critical reader would quickly recognize that discrepancy and kind of see the current conditions and the current teachings about, or policies around safety for what they are.
I was blown away as I was reading it. There's in the second article in the August 31st, part 2, it's got President Russell M. Nelson at the 2018 training seminar for new mission presidents said that if missionaries are obedient, quote, they will be protected, both physically and spiritually, according to the Church News. Quote, teach them that in spite of their ever-present risks, they will be much safer than will be their classmates and colleagues who are not called on missions. A mission is the safest place on earth for them at this time. So how does that feel to have President Russell M. Nelson saying that in the summer of 2018?
I hope that is not malicious. I don't like to think that it is. I think that that's well-intentioned. That's a beautiful belief system. And yet we know that.
I'll be more direct.
Okay. I'm like,
So how could you read that as a victim of sexual assault on a mission and not feel furious? That's not true. Or it's not true as applied to me. So what does that mean about me spiritually? And what is that? This is when everything crumbles. So you can't say that, because then what happens when something actually happens? Everything crumbles.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so what's the area called again that you were in?
My mission
Yeah.
is Cuernavaca.
So he's basically saying if you go to Weber State University in Ogden or Snow College, but you don't go on a mission, or if you go to Dixie or Logan, Utah State, you're less safe than if you go to Cuernavaca, Mexico.
Where the missionaries didn't even have the police phone number because no one calls the police because they're not a reliable source of protection.
But that's what he's saying, right?
That's exactly what he's saying.
And he's saying that, it's got to be invalidating that if you're obedient, you'll be protected.
Exactly. And by the way, we did not break one mission rule. So my assault happened on a Tuesday at 11 a.m. in broad daylight. So please don't use that against me, and don't speak in generalities when it's just not true. So it feels horrible.
And people have used that to blame me for what happened. They look for ways that I broke the rules. And I didn't.
Because the prophet can't be wrong.
Yeah. And
right?
First off, so people have said, well, you went in somewhere where no one else was home, so you broke a rule, so it's your fault. And I'm like, first off, there were 2 other people home. We, didn't know exactly in the house where they were, but they were home. And all the lights were on. And okay, if you want to blame me for that, missionaries do that every day, all across the world.
There were people home, though.
There were, yeah. So they can't, yeah, but I know that missionaries do go into homes without other people every single day.
I think it's just fascinating how quickly people look for ways to justify what happened instead of just admitting that, I actually did everything right, and yet, in spite of that, this happened. So it's so disappointing. It's disappointing that there's no ownership of that either. So they speak in generalities and create this culture of young, and they are young, by the way, and they are naive, and you're indoctrinating them with, mission, do this, do that. So naturally they're going to feel protected because you're telling them they'll be protected. And then to turn that around on us, it's just this youthful idea, and why didn't I report? So you're creating that culture. So at some point there has to be ownership of the culture they've created. And I feel the same way with members creating the culture that glorifies the crazy mission story. You've created that. You think it's fascinating and exciting, and that's what you want to hear in a homecoming talk. So they have to take ownership of what that kind of rhetoric does to the mind of a young missionary. It's not like we choose to feel that way. You're telling us that that's how we should feel. There are scriptures used about, angels round about me. That's how I should feel. Why would I feel otherwise?
Yeah. So if somebody were to say to you guys, hey, listen, it's terrible what happened to you, but, there's pain and suffering in the world, and most missionaries are safe. So you're making this big deal, scaring all these people, causing a big ruckus, when, you had really bad luck, but all in all, missionaries are super safe. And we're not going to shut down all missions because you can't avoid there being some risk. So being a missionary involves risk. So, that's just kind of the way it is.
All we've asked them to do is mitigate that risk. We have not ever suggested that it would be possible to remove all risk or all pain and suffering from missions. And certainly we aren't so naive to believe that sexual assault won't still happen and that death on the mission won't still happen. We've just asked them to use their resources to do everything in their power to mitigate that risk. And the suggestions that we've had don't even really require a vast amount of resources. It just requires organizing and rallying around the idea that missionaries deserve safety and that there's protocol necessary to make sure that happens. So I would actually love for somebody to say, we're so sorry that happened to you, but, it happens. It would be a relief for them to at least admit that they don't plan on making those changes, or that they're not prioritizing safety. It always felt like that would actually just be a relief to hear them admit that it's not prioritized.
Versus have these little committees
just go through the motions and meet with me and then don't update me. And I would rather just hear that this is the cost of doing business, because that's how it feels.
I think it's outrageous, number one, that safety statistics aren't tracked meticulously across every mission, and that they're not made public. That these statistics should be tracked, because if you get called to Bogota, Colombia, if you get called to Uruguay, Paraguay, Mexico, wherever, right? Africa, I've heard about missionaries being deeply traumatized by witnessing disease and death in Africa. As a parent and as a young missionary, you should know, what are the depression rates? What are the anxiety rates? What are the early return rates? What are the assault rates? What are the death rates for each mission? And you can say, I don't want to assume that risk, or I do want to assume that risk. But at least the information's been tracked, and at least you've been given all the information.
Right. And I think we also want to combat the culture of, you receive a call and that's it, and remind young adults and their parents that you are responsible for yourself and you have the control to say, that actually doesn't sound or feel right, so please reassign me. And they probably will. I would imagine they would.
There needs to be a clear path to do that, though.
No, and I agree.
Yeah. Like, there just isn't right now, so how would someone do that?
I think at one point in our meetings, I had mentioned, there's all this risk in my area, and it was suggested that I, could have Googled that. I'm a consenting adult, a volunteer. I volunteered to go. But again, none of this acknowledges this culture that they create. For men, this is a commandment. So, and you are called there for a reason, and there are specific people that you are going to meet in that place. So in that belief system, you tell me it's a commandment, you tell me I'm called by a prophet, and you tell me that there are specific people waiting for me and that their eternal salvation relies on it. So do you think I'm ever going to look at that call and Google it and say, looks like this is on a do not travel list. Are you sure? Of course not. You're going to go.
You're going to assume the church, with all its vast hundreds of billions of dollars of resources,
would take care of it.
Would use every means at their disposal to make sure every missionary is safe and taken care of.
Correct.
And because they're Jesus Christ's church, they're compassionate, when that's what we would expect. Another interesting thing, during one of our meetings, what I understood was that when we sign to accept our call, they suggested that is signing away any
liability?
Yeah. And I mean, we're clearly not made aware of that. Perhaps that was just a crappy answer thrown at us during that meeting. I mean, we didn't even ask for it. It was just tossed out there as, well, when you sign for your accepting your call, they suggested that it signs away liability.
Oh my goodness.
It was shocking. I mean, that's what I understood. But yeah, it was very surprising.
What was the reaction to your to the articles? So what did you hear from friends, from family? Did people reach out to you on the internet? What were the comments like?
So, in general, to me, I was surprised that everybody was so supportive I could not avoid the comments section because that's who I am, and it was actually totally neutral and supportive. And Rachel, the three of us kept in touch, the following week, and Rachel had mentioned that an immigration attorney reached out to her following up because she works with people seeking asylum from my mission. So it's shocking to her that, she'd be working with these people frantically trying to leave, and, the church is sending missionaries there. The most shocking thing that I heard after the article was I had a former boss who's awesome post the article or share it on Instagram, and somebody following her responded and said, hey, thank you for sharing. I was actually in Camille's mission. I think it was probably a year after I was there. She had mentioned that she felt unsafe constantly and referred to a few examples of men banging on the door or men walking around with machetes and threatening them. She said, when that survey came out, my companion asked that I did not share any of that information because we were teaching people that we loved, and she was concerned that we would be removed from the area. So I essentially did not include that on the survey. We stayed in the area and the harassment continued.
So missionaries were scared to be honest on the surveys because they were worried that it would keep people from getting converted to the church.
That was such a specific example in my mission, but we've been missionaries, I'm sure that happened across the board.
They also mentioned that in that girl's case, the survey was given over the phone by his own leader.
I think there was a call to remind them to take it. I don't know if it was administered over the phone. I don't know if that would have been possible. I think it was just like, hey, make sure to take the survey.
That's good. Because if it had been over the phone, I would have been concerned about their administration.
What about other victims of sexual assault reaching out to you?
So this was in the article as well, I started a website called Time for Cambio with an A.org. And it's...
Cambio means change in Spanish.
Yes, cambio means change in Spanish. It's supposed to just be a space where people can share their mission stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. To combat the stigma around having negative experiences and admitting it. And so many people have reached out through that, discussing tons of issues on their missions, not just sexual assault, but
Have you found others who've been sexually assaulted on the mission or not yet?
I think the stories have been, there's rampant sexual harassment.
I have heard someone reached out about another person they knew, very close to them, who was raped by his companion. So
if there are listeners who know of stories of other missionaries experiencing sexual assault or significant violence or lack of safety, reach out to timeforcambio.org.
Yep.
And also you can email me at mormonstories@gmail.com, and we can maybe do a series, because I know at least in Africa there are missionaries being exposed to incredible amounts of violence, unsanitary conditions, lack of safety, and this is the only way the church changes, is if a spotlight is shown and the church through the media, through public exposure, gets shamed and embarrassed into making changes. They won't do that on their own.
I like that you said spotlight, because I'm sure you've seen it. There's a movie, Spotlight, about sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, and it really did make a world of difference. So we do want to draw awareness so everyone can be safe and just not experience that.
So if you have experienced a very unsafe mission or unsafe mission experience, please email us and let us know.
Yeah.
So what do it probably isn't lost on you. We should go through the history here. Kate Kelly comes out, the September 6th come out in the early 90s trying to advocate for feminism and women. They're all excommunicated. Kate Kelly comes out eventually, does ordain women, and takes it to the public, does public actions to try and advocate for women. The church does make some changes that are pro-women, and they excommunicate Kate Kelly for her efforts. You could point to, my situation or Jeremy Runnels, where we're concerned about the church's lack of transparency with its historical problems. The church ends up making changes like the essays, like this new book that it's come out with, like the Joseph Smith Papers Project. They respond to the public actions and to the negative press and to the activism, and then they excommunicate me and Jeremy. Sam Young highlights the problems with the church's interviewing of children and inappropriate sexually explicit interviews. They do make some changes to the policy, not enough, and then they excommunicate Sam Young. Joseph Bishop remains an active member in good standing, of course. He actually is acknowledged to have sexually assaulted people as a mission president. He's been left alone. The church has thousands, tens of thousands of sexual assault perpetrators that were never convicted. But what the church absolutely seems to have a pattern of doing is punishing anyone who stands up against the church to call the church to change. So they actually do change, but they punish the people who agitate for the change. Are either of you concerned about retribution? Are you going to just kind of say, well, we've said our piece, we did the article, now we're going to kind of fade off into the woodwork? Or are you going to keep agitating for change? And if you do, are you concerned about you may end up like Sam Young?
I think at this point I'm going to continue publishing stories on timeforcambio.org, but beyond that, I'm done. I don't have a desire to do more. I don't feel like I could do more without just destroying my own well-being. I am less afraid now of being like excommunicated or kicked out of BYU than I was previously, just because of how well received the article was. But I think I've come to realize, like, I'm a citizen of the United States of America. Like, I have so many freedoms. Like, I have a really good life. I have a lot of privileges. Like, I have a fantastic life. And I feel that even if it would make me incredibly sad. But if I were to face, like, ecclesiastical repercussions, I would still have everything that I need. That would make me very sad. Like, don't get me wrong, that's not what I want, and that's not what I hope for. And again, like I said before, I don't view myself as a villain. I view myself as someone constructive trying to make this better.
What's it like to have to worry as a BYU student that there could be repercussions for your educational career by being open and honest? I'm actually not that scared. That would make me sad. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't live my life in fear of that because I could just go to another school. But sometimes you lose 1 to 2 years worth of credit, costs a lot of money and time,
it would
right?
be so frustrating, and it would cost me a lot financially. But I think I would just be like, well, I can just go to another school. Like, I'm not going to let and this is speaking as a survivor of sexual assault, I'm not going to let anyone have power over me again. Like, if they want to make me leave, well, I'll leave and I'll live a good, happy life. I don't want to leave. I want to continue at BYU and make my own decisions, but without someone making them for me. But I'm like, I would probably be upset and sad, but I just recognize that I have so much in life and I would be okay. And I would be content knowing that I had made at least some sort of progress and helped at least some victim of sexual assault. And that would be worth it.
Some say that's a really important part of healing, is converting the sadness and the grief into action to try and prevent others from getting harmed.
It's been helpful for me.
Yeah. Camille, are you worried at all about repercussions for speaking publicly?
Absolutely not. No. I have repeated at every stage that my only goal has ever been to help make missions safer and keep missionaries safe. And given my experience and what I know my intentions have been, if they made that decision, I think that would speak for itself and in a way could potentially be liberating for me, because that in the same way that sending me to a paralegal communicated all I really needed to hear, I think that decision would do the same. But I don't feel threatened in any way by that. No. Short answer, no.
Maddy, I'm not going to ask you about your feelings about the church and its truthfulness, because you're at BYU, and if you're at BYU and you lose your faith, you risk getting kicked out. And so I'm not even going to go there with you. But Camille, what does this do to your faith? What does this do to your testimony? What does this do to your convictions about the truthfulness of the church to go through this?
we mentioned I talked about in my segment, the feelings I had in the middle of the assault, feeling completely alone and realizing that agency was just dominating the situation and there was no miracle or intervention that was going to take place. And I think that puts you in a really difficult place. And I found pretty quickly after coming home that it wasn't healthy for me to attend church. And when you remove yourself from constant, when you're no longer constantly inundated with the kind of same pieces of information, you get to a point where you can start thinking and everything feels very clear. And I think that's what's happened to me, where I'm in a place where for the first time in, I think, my adult life, over the last couple of years, I've actually been able to stop and say, what do I feel about that? What do I feel about God and about the gospel as a whole? And I don't know if I've landed anywhere specific. I can just say that my beliefs have changed pretty radically. Becoming a parent does that to you as well. What do I want my son to be raised in, and how do I want him to, view and treat women and treat other people and respect marginalized groups. And so a lot of my views, even before my mission, didn't always align with the church's beliefs, but I feel like now I'm in a place where I can get to know myself, which is a really liberating feeling.
In the newspaper article, you talk about 2 assaults. Can you share what you said about the second assault?
Yeah, I said I feel like there have been 2 assaults, and the first was my sexual assault, and the second was the reaction of the institution that I trusted. And I said that in the course of the last 4 years has been more damaging. I feel like I've been able to be resilient, and I suffer from some anxiety and fear that I think stem from my sexual assault. But feeling betrayed by this institution that you have given your life to for years has been so traumatizing. And you see it happen, the intense loyalty that people have to institutions is it's just beyond me. And I, watched it happen in my home state with the USA gymnasts and the doctor Larry Nassar at Michigan State, and how many people rallied behind the school and the administrators instead of paying attention to individual victims. And it just changes the way you think about the world and changes the way you think about individual people experiencing suffering, and changes what you prioritize. And I, feel like I'm in a healthy place, but it's been devastating to get here for sure.
Give our listeners a sense, each of you take some time on this. What are the lingering residual effects of having experienced a sexual assault? Because someone who's clueless and insensitive might just say, you know what, that stuff happened in the past, but you're through it now, you've been to therapy, it's been years now, you move on, right? What help people understand how it doesn't just go away, how it continues to affect you, so that they can get a sense for the lingering effects of trauma?
I know I am so much more fearful than I used to be. And that's not to say I'm just like a wimpy person that's always afraid. But, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I can't go back to bed until I go and make sure that door is locked. Or my husband has to go do it. And so I'm much more fearful. And it's definitely impacted my family relationships, because none of us expected all of these residual effects. And my parents are tired. Like, it's been 2 years and they never expected that it would make its way into every aspect of my life. And they don't know what to do. They don't know how to respond. I mean, I think that they could use therapy as well, because they don't know what they're doing, and they're doing their best. They're good people, but they're exhausted. And so I feel like
kind of survivor trauma. Is that what it's called?
Secondary
What's it called?
trauma.
Secondary trauma.
Yeah. And they're tired. They're sick of talking about this. And yet that takes a toll on our relationship when I know they're sick and tired of talking about it. And I mean, that's not to say that they're heartless. They're compassionate. They are here. They try their best. But I know that they're tired of it. It's impacted. It impacted dating. It impacted getting married for me. I have a fantastic husband, but he also gets tired of talking about it. I mean, this isn't something I just think of every once in a while. It's a daily thing that I think about and remember, and I'm constantly sharing new little thoughts or telling him how it is impacting other areas. And it's tiring. It's just tiring for everyone and myself. And I had no idea that it would impact my spirituality this much. And I've met some incredible people who I can talk to about sexual assault and faith. And yet I'm at BYU and frequently feel very isolated, because the biggest things in my life that I want to talk about, I just feel like I can't. That these other people at BYU would not necessarily understand. And I mean, there are some who are fantastic, but it can feel isolating in this community. Those are probably some of the biggest residual effects for me.
How about you, Camille?
I think it's just shocking how it sneaks up on you when you thought it went away, and how it changes forms into anything from same thing, like doors needing to be locked and me waking up in a panic, to your worldview changing, where you previously existed in a place where that would never happen to you, and now it feels like, of course that's going to happen to you. So you're at a sporting event or a concert and you think about every worst case scenario. I just live my life in worst case scenarios. As a parent, like, constant panic about my child, like that something horrible is going to happen to him when I least expect it, and the anxiety is just overwhelming. I remember when I first got home and was living in Salt Lake before I was engaged, my husband thought it would be funny to pop out from behind a door and scare me. And I sobbed in the bathroom for like an hour. That feeling of immediate like fight or flight was way too much. I can't I can't watch anything like a scary movie anymore, because I felt that panic for, over an hour, and that's just not a place I can exist in, even in tiny amounts. At work, they have trainings about what we would do with an active shooter, so I have conversations with my bosses about how I will be frozen if that happens, so someone will need to come find me. So it just, it is it's just a constant awareness of all of these threats. And sometimes you feel hopeless, like this world is so bad. There are so many crazy people that want to hurt other people, and at any time it could happen to you again. So I think realizing that it probably, you could do therapy and then a half hour later you could be completely set back and ruined is really hard. You feel like you make progress, and then somebody says something or does something or looks at you a certain way, and you're back where you were.
Re-triggered. Mm-hmm. Why not sue the church? Why not sue them for $3 million or $5 million for, you of all have a case, because this is a place that was on the State Department list of unsafe places, and the kidnappings that were there and pulling missionaries out and putting them back in. And why not sue the church and make a boatload of money, but more importantly, hit them where it really hurts, which is in the pocketbook and in public perception?
Again, my goal was always to pursue missionary safety, and up to this point, I, have always wanted to go through what I considered to be more appropriate channels, meaning directly through, church members or church leaders to accomplish that. And then I think this article was, another phase of, okay, well, let's see what happens after I do this.
So you still have the option. Is there a statute of limitations?
There would be, yes. I'm not aware of what that is, but don't think I've reached it yet, so.
Okay, so it's an option.
Many things are an option.
Okay. So is this something you've considered?
No, I think many people have brought it up to me as an option, so through conversation I've casually considered it, but it's nothing I've actively pursued in any way.
Okay. How about you, Maddy?
I think my case would be harder to make than Camille's. And also, this is my tribe. And this is I love so many LDS people, and I don't think that people are going to stop going on missions. So I've just tried to channel my energies where I felt that it would make the most difference to the actual people that I love who will be out there serving missions. I think lawsuits totally have a place and can make a difference. I'm just not sure that it is, that it has a place in my story and with this.
Well, I think I just heard 2 huge sighs of relief from Curtin and McConkie downtown.
Also, I would say I think I have about had what I want to take in regards to this, and a lawsuit would be miserable. It would be exhausting, and I'm ready to just move on.
Now you are flying down
Yeah.
to pursue is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, so once they realized that the first lawyer was doing nothing, they did hire a second lawyer who was a member of the church, and I know him personally, and he's a very professional, great person, and he has made progress, and supposedly me and my husband will be flying down to Bolivia before October 12th, because that's the deadline. There's a 6-week window that the courts in Potosi gave us to record my testimony against our perpetrator. His name's Rolando Cruz Melchor. And I just learned about this 2 weeks ago, that this was actually going to be happening, and it could still fall through because they've been telling me for over 2 years that this was going to happen, and it looks like it's finally going to happen. I have the option of recording my testimony if he's ever apprehended, but I feel it'd be better just to get it recorded now, because who knows where I'll be at down the road. I could have kids, I could be working full time, and it could be more challenging to go. And there's no guarantee he's even going to be apprehended. He fled to Argentina. But there's a nationwide arrest warrant out for him, so hopefully if he ever crosses back over the border, he'll be apprehended, and they would have my testimony on hand. My companion, as far as I understand, does not want to return and record her testimony. Her parents' health is fragile, and she's just moved on in a different way than I have. I've considered, why am I even doing this? He lives halfway around the world. I could get killed when I return to Bolivia. That fear is ever present.
And the church is paying your way, right?
They are.
Yours and your husband's way.
So that is one good thing that they have done, is that since that first phone call 3 months after the assault, they have been paying for lawyers to pursue this legal case. And like they flew me and my mom to the Bolivian consulate in Los Angeles to like do some stuff there for this. So I mean, at least they're doing that. But I mean, no one even called the police in Camille's case, so that's not an option. But I'll give them that at least they're doing that. And I've wondered, I mean, I don't want to do a legal case but against the church, but that would sure be interesting to be doing that and then have like Kurt and McConkie paid for by the church fighting my legal case. It would just be bizarre. But I don't want to sue them. So.
Anything else either of you want to say about this case before I ask you a few final questions? I want to make sure you get a chance to say everything you wanted to say. Do you feel like you've said it?
Yeah, I think the only other piece that I think should be acknowledged is care for missionaries that don't live in the United States. Because, we talk about our stories, but there's another person in each of our stories. There was somebody next to me the whole time that went through what I went through and suffered from a lot of PTSD, and I have no idea what resources are or were available to her. And so the care needed certainly extends beyond American missionaries. So it's complicated.
I would check in with my companion when I got legal updates, and as far as I understand, she did not get them.
So the third world victims are treated as kind of second-class citizens.
Yeah, I mean, there were times where I received updates about evacuations from my mission, and they let me know that they only removed American sister missionaries. And I'm half Hispanic, and my companion was Mexican, and I don't think, I wasn't targeted because I was viewed as an American missionary. I don't think they had any idea when they saw me that I was American at the time. So
That's showing a value of American lives over.
I don't think that that's their intent, but that's what it communicates.
Yeah.
And I do think in some area, maybe I might be wrong. You can disagree with me. I just wonder if in some areas, like in parts of Bolivia where there was a lot of anti-Americanism, that maybe it would be okay to have Latin American elders because they do blend in a lot more. And I mean, it just depends. And I mean, if we tracked the violence, we'd know if they had been targets as well, or if it was really just the Americans. And I mean, that might just be the case for La Paz, Bolivia, and Potosí, maybe. I don't know, because we really should be tracking that and looking at that. But I think there's a possibility that in some areas, the source of violence could be anti-Americanism or resentment for unnecessary involvement in government. But obviously in Camille's area and situation, that was not the case. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Maddy?
Nope.
Feel like you got it all out?
Yep. Thanks.
Does it feel good to talk about this, or is it re-triggering? Is it traumatic? Just telling your story to the full world, is that actually healthy? Do you recommend it?
I think I recommend whatever feels healthy for each individual survivor. And for me, that's always been talking. And I've told the story so many times that I think I'm able to do it and detach. There are times when I'm alone where I really process the details of what I'm saying. And I don't know if I've done that completely with my whole story, but I feel if it's helpful, you should do it. And if it's painful to talk about, you should consider not doing it or waiting until it's not.
For me, every time I tell my story, it's physically distressing in the moment, but I've gotten to the point where I can be okay. But every time afterwards, I've got to take some time and take care of myself and recover. And every time I hear Camille's story, it just makes me want to sob. And I'm sure I will go home and do that. I can't not after hearing her story. But yeah, I agree. It's just up to every individual. But for me, it's been super helpful. But I wanted to choose how I shared it. So I'm glad that I could choose my exact specific ways that I wanted to share it. Yeah.
what I wanted to close is to have you guys each give some words of wisdom or encouragement to a few groups. So I'm going to start with survivors of sexual assault. Let's just say that there are some listeners who recently experienced a sexual assault and they don't know how they're ever going to heal or get better. Take turns, if you don't mind, look into your respective cameras and just what words of encouragement would you give to a survivor of sexual assault, if you're comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I think my challenge is that I certainly don't feel like I've come out on the other side of it. And I think, so words of advice would be to just keep going. Like I don't know if there's an end to this. And that probably doesn't sound good. And they probably didn't enjoy hearing that. I just don't know. I don't know what an end looks like, so you just have to keep going. And
what things have helped you heal, at least partially? What's been helpful to you?
I think discovering what actual self-care looks like has been really important, and just getting to know myself and taking care of myself in general. I'm a big advocate of therapy, not through LDS Family Services for me. I go weekly, and I find that even if I don't have a pressing, emotional issue related to my assault, that it's helpful to talk with somebody neutral about my life and my concerns and my anxiety. So my only advice would be to go to therapy and just keep going. It's so hard, and nobody is deserving of that. And I'm so sad that such a large percentage of women around the world will have or will go through that in some form.
Mm-hmm. I would also say to just take your time. I feel like other people may have expectations of the timeline for healing, and they don't know anything. Like, take your time. This is your journey of healing. And things that were helpful for me were finding relationships with people where, and this is like a small little handful of people who I could talk about everything with, and learn to build that trust again with a handful of people. And for me, EMDR therapy was fantastic. It was more helpful for me than just like normal like CBT or talk therapy. So that was very helpful for me.
So that's the bilateral stimulation where either through little vibrating nodes or lights.
Yeah, and I use the vibrating nodes, which I know sounds so kooky, but I remember going in after hearing about that Las Vegas shooting and just being so distressed, and then doing EMDR, talking it all through, and just leaving just calm. And it really, I think that the assault, it feels like it changed my brain and like
It did.
Yeah. And I think that the EMDR was the most healing for that. So
and
it's worth a try.
The Veterans Administration has approved EMDR as an empirically supported form of treatment for PTSD. Mm-hmm. And it can either be done with lights or with these vibrating nodes. And the idea is this bilateral stimulation of left, right, while you talk about and process emotionally the trauma you've been through, can lead to some positive results.
And another just tip is that, at least in Orem, Utah, through their Center for Women and Children in Crisis, they had grants that paid for 24 sessions of therapy. And it was done with someone who was a professional and specialized in sexual assault. So I'd met with like 3 other counselors briefly with each of them before I found this that worked. So if you don't feel like therapy is successful, keep going and trying and finding someone that works for you. And that Center for like Women and Children in your local community could provide a grant for free therapy if money is an issue.
So the church didn't pay for your therapy?
They offered the 6 free sessions through LDS Family Services, and I used those 6 between the 2 in Washington and then 4 here. And beyond that, there was no option. I mean, they told me on the phone, like, we can, like, that's an option, but I mean, there was no clear way of making that happen. Camille could talk about that, but
You have to fight.
Are they paying for your therapy? Mm-hmm. Okay, they are, but you
Yeah,
have to fight for
it took, they didn't approve it for 2 years, and then they asked most recently for me to sign a version of a HIPAA form where I have to update them every 8 sessions on my progress, just a general, she's progressing. I mean, it's so, what does that even mean? And why do you, so I declined that, and for now they're still paying, but I just, this was part of my concern is, what if you don't have somebody who has the energy or strength or means to fight this? Then you just silently suffer.
What words would you give a family member or friend or church member or church leader when someone comes to them and says, I've been sexually assaulted? Any words of wisdom or perspective for them? What can someone do to respond in the right ways and to help in the right ways?
I think we have a problem with society with not starting with believing, so that would be a very important place to start, is acknowledging the situation and believing them. There are a lot of things not to say, and I think it's important to remember that that person needs control and they need to be in charge of what happens to them next. And so imposing your own will on them or insisting that they need to do something that they don't feel comfortable with is extremely inappropriate. I know it's very uncomfortable for church members to reconcile the idea that somebody might not want to attend church anymore, or that church could actually be a trigger for them, but it's important that they listen to a victim if that's what they're communicating, and not try to discredit that or manipulate that in a way that makes the victim seem at fault for something or less worthy of something. So it's very delicate, and they need to be respectful and loving and supporting and listening, and that's it. That's it.
I'd say express sorrow. What happened was devastating. I mean, it's not something to respond to flippantly. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And then just follow their lead with their timeline, with the victim's choices. Just follow their lead.
What about this sort of like trying to give plan of salvation explanations or justifications?
I was also going to say, if it starts with at least, don't say it.
Oh my God.
So like
At
what?
least you weren't raped.
At least you weren't murdered. At least you survived. It could have been so much worse.
So don't do that?
No. If
Why is that bad?
It's minimizing.
Yeah, because it...
Yeah.
I've gotten that from like immediate family members, and it's shocking.
Yep.
Like we could play that game all day. At least you have a roof over your head, like then nobody's problems or worries or concerns even matter. So what's the point? It's just it's the least validating phrase. I had a family member ask another family member why I haven't just gotten over it already. Don't say that. That's pretty basic.
What if it's like, well, just pray and read the scriptures, have faith, turn to your Savior. Your Savior's going to make it better. What about that kind of thing?
Glad that works for you, but follow the victim's lead. Don't push your beliefs and agenda on them. They get to choose for themselves what works for them.
And I think unless I'm asking you for suggestions, you don't need to volunteer them. I think people need to learn to just listen and say that they're sorry that happened. They're so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't have a magical answer. I don't know what will make it better, but I'm here. If you need anything, if you need someone to talk to, if you want to just cry, if you want to complain, if you want to just be yourself,
You're fantastic at that.
Truly, that's all. And then you feel safe being yourself, whatever that looks like. That's not me saying, I promise you that if you do this, quit promising me things. It didn't work out, it didn't work the first time. It's just not appropriate.
My other thought is 2 of my friends' moms had also been like brutally assaulted and invited me over to talk with them. And one, we sat on her bed, another we were like making bread or something. But they just shared like briefly, like this was my brutal assault and I'm so sorry that happened to you because it was so painful for me. I can't even imagine. So not to say you understand because everyone's is different. But for me, the other I was close to these people. They're some of my very best friends' moms. So, they were in the right place to do that. Don't do that if you're a stranger. But I know that, like, someone else compared Camille's assault to, like, their basement flooding. And, like, just don't do that. Like, it's not the same as a basement flooding. Like, maybe if you also were brutally assaulted, you could, understand and sit in that pain with that person. But don't compare it to other things besides a brutal assault.
I also think that people get so worried about what to say that they don't say anything at all, and that can be equally painful. Silence from friends, silence from family. You wonder if they ever think about what happened to you, knowing that you're thinking about it every day. So I would urge people that don't know what to say to at least reach out and say they're sorry and that they're thinking about you, because that means the world.
Mm-hmm.
Or can I be there to listen? Can I be a listening ear?
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't know what to say, when I got home, like little gifts were so meaningful and so sweet. Whether that's a bottle of lotion, like just to show that person like that you're thinking of them. If you don't know what to say, send them a card. Send them some lotion. Drop off a flower. Anything to let that person know you're thinking of them.
And words for any words for the church? If Salt Lake City church headquarters is listening and they're like, okay, maybe we didn't handle this quite right, and they're listening about what they can do better, any final thoughts you want to share with them? Requests, expressions of anything?
No. I don't correspond unless it's color coded. So for now, I will pause, and I think I've said all I can possibly say, and it, the ball's in their court.
Yeah, my grandma says if you can't say anything at night, to not say anything at all. So that's what I'll do
Follow
today.
grandma's lead.
Okay. Well, words can't express how grateful I am for your willingness to speak publicly and tell your stories. I believe that silence is a killer. I believe that silence is one of our biggest diseases as a culture. And it's a very courageous thing to speak out, to speak up, to stand up against the patriarchy, honestly, and to tell your stories and to refuse to be silenced and to try and affect change from within. And then when you feel like you've reached limits, to be able to speak publicly and tell your stories, because maybe there'll be someone who decides not to accept that mission call to an unsafe place, or who decides not to go on a mission because they didn't feel good about it anyway, but now they feel like they have a good reason, or a mission president or church headquarters that's not going to send missionaries back to that area because now they've realized that people can get really hurt, and or the church's reputation can really get soiled. Whatever it takes to get them to make more judicious decisions. And I'm hoping, I hope that the church does a better job at screening areas and not sending missionaries into unsafe areas. I hope that they have better safety training for the missionaries, for the mission presidents, for the mission leaders, zone leaders, district leaders. I hope that they react better to assaults going forward, offer mental health services for as long as is necessary, provide support, get people in contact with who they need to be in contact with, get the information disseminated, follow up, apologize, validate, learn from it, follow up and let people know changes that are being made in response so that you don't feel like this was all in vain. And I hope that they do a better job of tracking statistically all the different ways people's safety can be jeopardized, and then they become more transparent about that reporting so that people can know the risks of if they want to sign up for risks, at least let them know the risks and track it and be responsible. And then I hope, again, that missionaries get better support afterwards. So that's what I'm getting from this, and I hope people listen, and I think you will end up saving lives from your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You got it. Woohoo.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Well, thanks to you guys. So this is Camille Hunka and Maddy Seacoat, and the website is
timeforcambio.org.
timeforcambio.org. If you have a story of your mission, just like Sam Young is collecting stories of inappropriate sexually explicit interviews, Maddy is collecting stories of
missions, the good, the bad, and the ugly, safety issues, health issues, whatever your honest mission story is.
And finally, if you have a mission story that you feel needs to be told on Mormon Stories Podcast, I don't mind doing a series I would really love to do a series on missions in Africa and how unsafe and traumatic those missions can be, because that's all the church's missionary effort seems to be pouring into Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. Now that, in some ways the Latin America and Philippines have all been sort of exhausted and they're not getting the growth there. They've got wards with thousands of people and only 50 attending. Africa's next, and Africa's got unsanitary conditions, safety concerns, poverty issues, violence. And so if any of you want to share your story on Mormon Stories Podcast, if you think it will help lead to change to make our missionaries safer, please reach out. Email us at mormonstories@gmail.com. All right, so I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. Please email us if you have any questions or ideas. I want to thank everyone who supports Mormon Stories Podcast and makes this possible financially. Thanks to all our donors and supporters. Thanks to our board of directors and all those on staff that help make Mormon Stories possible. Please support us if you can. It makes a world of difference. You can go to mormonstories.org and you can click on the donate button, $10, $50, $100 a month, whatever you can afford. We're transparent in our finances. It's tax deductible in the U.S. And for as long as you'll support us, we'll continue helping to tell these stories that we know are leading to direct change within the church. So thanks for your support. Please support us if you can. And please tune in again soon for another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Take care. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Good luck,
Thanks, John.
gals. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for your stories.
Of course.